Hello there. Welcome to Just the Dis. We talk about Blu-rays here. My name is Brian, and for this video we are running through the newest round of releases from Imprint Films in Australia, and they are of course a division of Via Vision Entertainment and have been doing some really interesting stuff, and I've been covering them on the channel. I have some previous videos you can check out of other bundles from them. In this case, we're talking about I believe the May titles, May 2021 bundle of titles, and it is a hefty group. But let's get into it. There's a lot to talk about here, and a lot of interesting films for sure, and some more Blu-ray debuts, which is pretty neat. But I'm going to start with some singles, and then we'll go into some box sets. And let's kick it off with this. The Gambler from 1974. I can check the side because they always print the year on the side of the case, and that's pretty cool. So this is a really neat gambling movie, of course, as you can tell from the title. Interestingly, this is the second gambling movie they've released in 2 months. Last month they put out Let It Ride. Of course, that is a more comedic gambling movie. This one, less so. This one is pretty grim. It is directed by Carol Rice, who was this British New Wave director who did famously the movie Saturday Night and Sunday Morning, which is a really great angry young man movie from the 60s with Albert Finney. But he was sort of a co-director, not a co-director, but a part of the same group as like Lindsay Anderson and some of these other great British New Wave directors. And this is his first American film, I believe. It is written by James Toback, who also did Fingers and some other stuff that I'm sure you guys are aware of. And he seems to have drawn Toback, that is, from his personal life and his own experiences for this script. I'm not saying it's all based on real stuff, but there is definitely some stuff in here that feels like, from what I understand, things that he experienced. And so I think this was actually remade in 2011 with Mark Wahlberg, but I really dig this film. It's got a very, like I said, grim 70s feeling to it, and the idea and the story is basically that James Caan plays a New York, I'm not sure, it's like New York City College, or he's a college professor, and he has this horrible gambling addiction. And at the beginning of the movie, very first scene, we see him in a small private casino, and he loses $44,000. And there's a guy that works at the casino that's played by Paul Sorvino that seems to actually kind of like this character. The character's name is Axel Freed, and he sort of immediately lets him know, Axel, this is serious. This is a lot of money. Don't mess around with this. And so then it sort of just becomes this tale of how is he going to get that money, and who else is he involved with? Who else can he sort of pull into this? And some of the other supporting players are people like Lauren Hutton, who is his girlfriend. And then there's all kinds of really neat short, not quite cameos, like small roles for actors like Burt Young, who's like an assistant to a loan shark, and James Woods works as a bank employee. Emmett Walsh and Stuart Margolin show up at a casino. Vic Tayback shows up later. Antonio Fargas, too. So it's just really got this incredible supporting cast. But like I said, it's sort of a 70s dark, borderline noir fatalism kind of movie. That fatalism sort of looms over the whole movie. And there's even a really interesting and impactful score by Jerry Fielding, who worked a lot with Sam Peckinpah. And the score is based on Mahler's Symphony Number 1. And so it's, if you're familiar with Mahler's work, it's definitely sort of like, again, this ominous, and he's not totally recycling it. Like, he's adding some other stuff to it. Like, there were parts of the score that reminded me of, like, The Thing, Morricone's score for The Thing. Like, it's just this really dark thing that lays over stuff. So yeah, it's not a comedy by any stretch of the imagination, but James Caan is very good in it, and it's to his credit that he makes this character as kind of narcissistic and awful as he can be to a lot of the people in his life. You know, like, he goes to his mom to help, you know, with his debt, and I'm not going to get into the specifics of some of his relationships. That's stuff that's neat to see in the movie, but it's a really interesting portrayal, and he pulls off something interesting in, like I said, that he's not, that I think you can almost stick with him for most of the movie. So anyway, that said, here is the back. This is a region-free disc. This played fine in my US player. And the supplements here are 1080p high-definition transfer from Paramount, audio commentary by cinema author and critic Matthew Asprey Gear, and then After the Game, a video essay by Chris O'Neill. Chris O'Neill's work I know from the stuff he's done for Fun City Editions, and he's worked for other labels as well. And it's a neat essay. It's presented in this case as scenes from the film with text overlay, talking about thematics and sort of character relationships and underlying meaning. And it's about 14 minutes. It's pretty cool. And then in addition to that, you have on the morning after Composing the Gambler, a new interview about Jerry Fielding's score with author and film music historian John Burlingame, who used to, I feel like he did some stuff for Twilight Time in terms of scores and commentaries even, or something. So I recognize that name. And then you have In on the Cut, a new interview with the assistant editor, Sue Kingsley. And then, really interesting, archival audio interview with Carol Rice about his life and career from the British Entertainment History Project from 1991. And that's like 2 hours, just sitting there with Carol Rice, this great director, and going through his whole career. So that is pretty cool. So that is the outside. And again, this has the side-loading slipcase. This is part of the limited edition packaging, is that you get the side-loading slipcase. This is what the inside artwork looks like. And then they don't do reversible covers. There's the disc itself. They do interior artwork like that, which is pretty cool. So that is The Gambler. Again, a Blu-ray debut and a 70s film that I think a lot of people haven't seen, but it's definitely worth checking out. Next, we have another one that I really enjoy, and this is a shift of gears in a lot of ways. This is The President's Analyst from 1967, directed by Theodore J. Flicker, starring the great James Coburn in the title role. And he is a therapist, an analyst, who wins the coveted job as an analyst to the President of the United States. And after sort of some many sessions with the president, some very intense stuff that we don't see. We don't ever see the president. We never see him talking to the president, but we see him going in and coming out of the president's office. And after a certain period of all these sessions and, security and, alarms going off at his house, this giant red light flashes like the bat signal whenever the president wants to talk. And, his schedule is very tricky. So James Coburn is getting called in the middle of the night. And eventually he starts to get really paranoid and starts to sort of freak out and worry about the sort of Secret Service and the governmental agencies portrayed in the film. They are the FBR and the CEA. They didn't want to necessarily go after any specific government organizations by name, so they've changed the names and have a nice warning at the beginning of the film that says we're not talking about them. This is obvious, but obviously it is standing in for those agencies. But so eventually he sort of freaks out and, goes on the run, sort of. And so the CEA and the FBR are desperately trying to scramble to get him back because he is now sort of a compromised individual and that he has, I guess government secrets in his head because he's talking to the president about what he's dealing with, and there's some very classified information. And so the Russians and all kinds of other agencies would like to get a hold of him and get information out of him. So he goes on the run. But again, this is a comedy, so I shouldn't make it... It sounds like a thriller the way I'm describing it, but it's actually a satire, and one of the great satires of the 60s, I think, actually. So I really dig this movie, and Coburn is incredible in it. And Godfrey Cambridge and Severn Darden are in it, and they, in sort of supporting roles, governmental agency guys, and they're both great. And Godfrey Cambridge has this really powerful speech at the beginning. I'm not going to spoil it at all, but it smacks you right in the face, because it's like, you're like, oh, this is a comedy, la-di-da, and then Godfrey Cambridge is actually having a session with James Coburn before he's brought in for the president, and he goes into this story from his childhood that is really intense and really personal, and it's such an interesting tonal shift that then jumps out of that back into comedy later. And I don't know, it's somehow the movie pulls it off, but it is a bit of a slap in the face when it starts, in terms of like, no, this is serious. This is not a joke. Anyway, so Coburn's really good. There's this whole, overlying idea that the phone company is this really evil agency, and, it's interesting how that sort of plays today. Obviously, we're not dealing with the phone company as an entity in and of itself, but we are dealing with some mega corporations who deal with all telecommunications, and privacy seems like a thing of the past, and this movie's definitely touching on all those sort of things. But anyway, I'm a big fan of this one. I want to say Larry Karaszewski is a big fan too. Maybe he did a Trailers from Hell on it. I could be wrong. But yeah, this is a Blu-ray debut as far as I know, and it is a 1080p high-definition presentation from Paramount. It has a commentary from Tim Lucas, which I always love, and Tim Lucas is a huge fan of this movie, which he says right out of the gate at the beginning of the commentary, so that's great. And it's a really good track. I love him on genre stuff, but I love him on something like this too, comedies. He does his usual thorough job. And then hats off to Imprint Films, because as you'll hear come up many times and has in the past, they really like to use Kim Newman a lot. Kim Newman is a big part of their arsenal in terms of, I want to say many of the discs that I have from them have an interview with Kim Newman, and they're usually 15 to 20 minutes. It's either him spotlighting the film itself or maybe the director. In this case, he's talking about the movie, and he has a lot of really interesting points. My favorite one had to do with him comparing the film to the work of Philip K. Dick, and saying that the one thing that he thinks that most of the film adaptations of Philip K. Dick get wrong is that they aren't funny, and that he thinks Philip K. Dick was a very funny author and was always trying to be funny, and that he wouldn't necessarily care for Blade Runner, or he wouldn't necessarily care for some of the adaptations of his films that are so serious. And so this touches on a lot of this conspiracy stuff, which I think is part of the Philip K. Dick thing. I don't want to spoil anything, but there's some stuff at the end that will line up with, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep in some ways, I think. But so that's a really interesting and valid point, and Kim Newman loves this movie, so it's really neat to hear him talk about it. And I love that you're going to hear him mentioned at least once or twice more in this video, because he's used a lot. So anyway, that is the back, side loading, and this is what it looks like on the inside. And then again, artwork and the disc. So that is a really cool Blu-ray debut. Very happy about that one. One more single and then some box sets. The Face Behind the Mask from 1941. This directed by Robert Florey and starring Peter Lorre. I had seen this one, but I had forgotten it completely. And so it was really nice to rewatch it. It is the story of an Hungarian immigrant played by Laurie who comes over. We literally see him arriving and seeing the Statue of Liberty as he sort of pulls up on the boat, and he immediately makes some friends in the city, one of which is a cop who helps him find a place to stay. And unfortunately, I'm going to spoil just this beginning part because it's the total setup of the movie. The place he ends up staying, there is a fire, and he gets caught in the fire, and his face is really badly burned to the point where, people are aghast to even look at him. I mean, from that title, you can imagine what happens. And so then he sort of becomes entangled with some less than reputable elements and gets involved in some criminal activity. And I don't want to give away too much more in terms of like some of the other characters that come into play in this. But it's a great Peter Lorre performance. And there's an interesting gear shift about halfway through where he goes from like, innocent foreigner to a much more hardened type, and he pulls it off. But yeah, it's a solid movie, man, really solid. And this one is a 1080p presentation by Columbia Pictures and Sony, so it looks good. They take care of their elements. And there's an audio commentary by film historian Alan K. Rode, who is always solid stuff. There's also an interview, Facemaker, Peter Lorre and the Face Behind the Mask, an interview with film historian Alan K. Rode. And then, again, film author and film critic Kim Newman on the Face Behind the Mask. So this is totally the kind of movie I always expect to hear Kim Newman talk about. He's definitely the kind of guy like Tim Lucas who does genre really well, especially older genre films like this. And so he has a lot to say about Robert Florey, the director. He talks about the career that he kind of almost had. Like he was originally going to direct Frankenstein and had the idea for The Abnormal Brain and I guess The Burning Windmill at the end. But, James Whale came along and Universal went with him instead. So there was some, sort of sad missed opportunities, but it sounds like Kim Newman is definitely a fan of Robert Florey, and he does a good job with this film, certainly. So if you're a fan of Peter Lorre, Robert Florey would go on to direct The Beast with Five Fingers also with Peter Lorre, so that's also recommended. I don't think that has a Blu-ray, but I could be wrong about that. Anyway, so that's your side load and the cover on the inside. These are all region unlocked. I had no problem playing these on my American US player. There's your inside. Okay. So those are some singles. Now, Essential Film Noir Collection 2. I talked about the first Noir collection, which was really solid, from Imprint Films on a previous video. And this is the new stuff, and it's a really nice group. There's 4 films included here. Again, we have a really cool box design. Just kind of slip the top off. And then we take out our movies. Okay. So I'll go through these one at a time. We'll start with Plunder of the Sun. This one is from 1953, directed by John Farrow, who also directed a bunch of great films, including Alias Nick Beale, which was one of the noirs included in the Essential Noir #1 box set. So a little continuity between directors in this one. And this is an interesting one because it is sort of bits of it feel a bit like the Maltese Falcon, maybe a little Treasure of Sierra Madre. There's even a part of this that I'm like, oh, is this kind of Indiana Jones? But it's not an adventure movie. It's just that the score, if you will, is dealing with sort of I want to say it's not Aztec. It's in the city of I want to say it's the ruins outside of Oaxaca, Mexico. So there's like some treasure there that sort of becomes a thing. But basically the idea is that Glenn Ford is an insurance investigator. He's down in Havana. He gets hired by a guy who's sort of like a Sidney Greenstreet type to carry a package, a very small package, across the border, and it ends up being a thing that a lot of people want that may or may not lead to a bigger treasure of some kind. But he runs into lots of questionable characters. There's a really great villain character who the actor's name is Sean McClory. And I guess he was a regular. This is produced by John Wayne's production company, Batjack. And Sean McClory was a regular in John Wayne movies and Batjack Productions. But he plays like this dyed blonde, crew-cutted, sunglass-wearing guy that I could see compared to a little bit, not just a little bit in terms of the Peter Lorre character in The Maltese Falcon in some ways. Except he's a little bit more aggressive, let's say. But so, yeah, there's a whole bunch of other characters at play that I'm not going to spoil, but who all seem to want to get a hold of the package and decipher what it is and what it means and what it can lead them to. But this is one I'd seen before, and I really enjoyed the revisit. The transfer looks good. It says a 1080p presentation of the film by Paramount. Interestingly, it has the Warner Brothers logo on the front and back, so I guess it's a Paramount movie owned, or a Warner Brothers movie owned by Paramount, but it looks pretty good. This has an audio commentary by Peter Ford, Glenn Ford's real-life son, and writer and historian Frank Thompson. So he's recalling stuff from his dad's life and his dad's career in this film specifically. There's also something called On Location with Glenn Ford, which is a brief series of photos that Peter Ford has provided. Apparently, Glenn Ford took a couple cameras with him on every movie shoot and took pictures, and so we get to see some of his pictures from this production. And he reads a letter that Glenn Ford wrote to his mother, Peter Ford's grandmother, during the production of the film. And it's only about 2 minutes, but it's kind of neat to hear how Glenn Ford wrote to his mom and the pictures that he took, So that's pretty cool. There is a featurette on Sean McClory, so that's in there as well. Film critic Barry Forshaw talks about the movie, which is neat. He's very specific about John Farrow and some of the other aspects in the movie, Glenn Ford. I think that's it. There's the back of that one. And the inside. Okay, so that is Plunder of the Sun. Next up we have Hollywood Story from 1951. This is a William Castle movie. And it is gimmick master William Castle, pre his horror genre movies. This is when he was sort of a contract director for Columbia at the time. Or actually, this is for Universal. I'm sorry. I forgot. And so it's more of a straight noir sort of mystery movie. But it is really intriguing. It is based on the real-life murder that sort of became notorious in Hollywood of William Desmond Taylor. And both Kim Newman and Eddie Muller are featured in the extras here, and they both make reference to this movie, having some straight line to the William Desmond Taylor murder, which is, again, a famous unsolved murder in Hollywood. But basically the idea is that Jim Backus, interestingly, plays a Hollywood agent, and he, at the beginning of the movie, is narrating, and he narrates a good portion of the movie. And his friend is played by Richard Conte. He's a theatrical producer who's moving to Los Angeles or California to try and make movies. And, so he flies out, and Jim Backus has set him up with a studio, and immediately he finds this bungalow that he shows him, and it's a bungalow where a famous director was killed. And the murder was never solved. And so for whatever reason, Richard Conte's character becomes really focused on that mystery. and he starts sort of poking around, and then he decides that's the movie he wants to make. He wants to make the movie about this director. And so people that were involved with this director and maybe involved with the murder start to surface when they hear that this movie is happening. And so it's a really neat mystery to kind of figure out. It's a whodunit at the end of the day. We have all the characters in front of us, and maybe one of them did it, maybe not. And it's a matter of who is it. But Richard Conte's very good, and he's very determined to solve the mystery and get the script right. And it also has Julie Adams, billed as Julia Adams. I want to say this is pre-Creature from the Black Lagoon, because I think that's 54, but I could be misremembering. But she's great in this. Sort of a dual role, but I won't go too far into that. But yeah, it's a really enjoyable mystery film. And Richard Egan also stars, as well as Fred Clark and Henry Hull. But I don't think I'd seen this one. And I think this is also a Blu-ray debut. I think Plunder the Sun is Blu-ray debut. The next two I don't think are. But so this, in terms of features, has 1080p presentation from Universal Pictures, audio commentary by professor and film scholar Jason A. Ney, film and author critic Kim Newman on The Hollywood Story. Great stuff. As I said, I love hearing Kim Newman talk about anything, really. And he goes into the William Desmond Taylor stuff and just some William Castle stuff. Like he's really well versed and does a great job just talking about this movie and things around it. And then, of course, Eddie Muller is interviewed. I want to say that's only about 4.5 minutes, but it's a tight 4.5 minutes, and he has a lot to say about the movie. He does warn you at the beginning of his featurette, don't watch this if you haven't watched the movie. So sometimes I like to watch a little Eddie Muller before I start a feature, but then I was like, oh, he's telling me not to. And I'm glad I didn't, because there are some spoilers in his featurette. There's also an interview with Julie Adams on The Hollywood Story, and I think that's it. But a really pretty solid package for a lesser known and lesser seen William Castle movie. So that is The Hollywood Story. And then next we have Private Hell 36. This one has gotten a Blu-ray before from Olive Films in the States, and maybe has an overseas Blu-ray as well. But this has some new features that I think will make this maybe the definitive version of Private Hell 36. This one from 1954, directed by Don Siegel, starring Ida Lupino, Steve Cochran, Howard Duff, Dean Jagger, and Dorothy Malone. Really great cast. And this one is about two LA detectives who sort of get in over their heads when they get involved with a nightclub singer played by Ida Lupino in one of, I want to say she did about 3 like jazz sort of nightclub singer roles. Roadhouse is another one that comes immediately to mind, and that's a great movie. And they get involved with her, and she's sort of the key to this missing money from a New York elevator robbery. And I don't want to spoil too much, but once they find the money, they're tempted to keep it, and things get complicated. We'll put it like that, okay? So that is more or less what the movie is about. But it's a really great cast. I think, for me, the weakest link is probably Howard Duff. I'm not a big Howard Duff fan. He just has a sort of, I don't know, there's a look on his face that's always a little confused or something that just doesn't quite work for me. But anyway, everybody else is great, and he's not bad. But I love the rest of the cast, and I love that this is a Don Siegel film, and there's some really great features in terms of the Siegelness of it and the Ida Lupino-ness of it. We have first an audio commentary from film historian Drew Casper, who's very good and well-versed in this kind of stuff. I want to say he was a USC professor, or maybe still is. So he always does a nice job. Now you have No One Like Her, Ida Lupino in Hollywood, a video essay by Kat Ellinger. Great stuff. That's about 30 minutes. And she's looking at Ida Lupino's career as an actor and as a filmmaker, as a director. And she really kicks it off in an interesting way, talking about how Lupino, didn't have any illusions about being some pioneer. Like, she got her first job sort of happenstance, in the way of happenstance, and she completely understood it, and she took the opportunities she got, and I think she did a great job when she did. But it's a really great essay in that it covers not just her filmmaking, but her acting career as well, and Kat is one of my favorite people to be involved with any Blu-ray special features, and she'll come up again later. There is also something called I Never Stood a Chance, Don Siegel in the 1950s. I want to say that one is definitely a Ballyhoo production. I'm not sure if all of them are. But that one is really neat. It's C. Courtney Joyner, who does a lot of commentaries, very adept at classic film, talking about classic movies. And he does sort of a career overview of Don Siegel that goes from his beginnings, like cutting montage for the studios, up through Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And he touches on some of the later stuff. He mentions something about how Siegel directed like 36 films and 16 of them had to do with lawmen, and how that is an interesting, overriding thematic that he had. But he also talks about some things that Siegel did consistently, like having his movie titles play over action, starting with something startling, surprising violence, and he had a few more that I'm forgetting, but those two were definitely two that stood out as things that I remembered that Siegel does a lot. So those are some really great features. There's also film critic Barry Forshaw on Private Hell 36 as well. So that's another solid one. And then lastly, we have City That Never Sleeps from 1953. And this one stars, let's see here, Gig Young is one of the main headliners. Edward Arnold is in this. Chill Wills, Marie Windsor, who's a great noir stalwart. I'm a huge Marie Windsor fan. It says Chicago cop Johnny Kelly, dissatisfied with his job and marriage, would like to run away with his stripper girlfriend, Angel Face, but keeps getting cold feet. During one crowded night, Angel Face decides she's had enough vacillation, and crooked lawyer Biddle has an illegal mission for Johnny that could put him in a financial position to actually go through with his plan. But other conflicting schemes are also in progress. So it's a complicated web of, potentially bad stuff. But it's, a solid noir. Definitely a nice addition to this box set. I want to say this one's had an Olive Films Blu-ray as well, but I may be thinking of a similarly titled film. So don't quote me on that. This has a 1080p presentation from Paramount, audio commentary from film critic and historian Imogen Sarah Smith, who is an all-star and is fantastic on noir commentaries. She's done a lot of work with Criterion, and so she is top-notch. And then, again, Kim Newman on the film. Another short interview with him talking about... It's always the same interview. He's sitting on his couch next to his bookcase, and he just goes to town. Just sort of... I'm sure he's got notes, but it feels very just off the cuff, like that's how sharp he is. But anyway, great to see Kim Newman in so many of these releases. I hope that's a continued thing. He's been on a bunch of Imprint stuff previously, so I'm assuming they're going to continue to have him, and I just love seeing him in all these Blu-rays. So that's the Film Noir box set, the Essential Collection. We have one more box set. It's a smaller one, and it is for Alfie. But this is, of course, the Michael Caine film from 1966. I'll get to the second movie in a second, but so this is an interesting one. The back says Alfie's not really a bad sort. It's just that he has this overwhelming desire for the opposite sex. You might say that birds are irresistible to him, sort of second nature. Based on the play by Bill Naughton, Alfie can be charming, delightful, and quick-moving, but beneath the surface is a lingering tragedy, simply and poignantly told about the taker and the taken. So this one is definitely one of the more memorable. I mean, not that he has any less than memorable performances, but I think one of the Michael Caine performances that stands out and is so strong in some ways that I find the movie a little tough to watch because Alfie is kind of not a great guy at the end of the day. But Caine just absolutely nails the charisma of this guy, the draw of him, like why women would be attracted to him and allow themselves to be treated the way he treats them, you know? So it's a really intriguing and memorable, like I said, Michael Caine performance, and really getting a nice treatment here from this box set. Now, this one has 1080p high-definition presentation from Paramount, audio commentary with film historians Joe Botting and Melanie Williams, Kat Ellinger on Alfie video essay, another video essay from Kat. That's great stuff. I love these collaborators that they're using. They just know what they're doing, in my mind. They're really sharp in terms of that. So hats off to Imprint for those. An appreciation by journalist, broadcaster, and author Matthew Sweet, another guy they use a lot. Archival video interview with director Lewis Gilbert at the London National Theatre from 1995. So a lot of great features on this one. There's your inside. Now, the neat thing about this is it also includes this movie, My Generation. And I want to say this is from 2017. And this is about Michael Caine. It says British film icon Michael Caine narrates and stars in My Generation, the vivid and inspiring story of his personal journey through the pop culture explosion that was 1960s London. Based on personal accounts and stunning archive footage, this feature-length documentary film sees Caine travel back in time to talk to the Beatles, Twiggy, David Bailey, Mary Quant, the Rolling Stones, David Hockney, and others. I haven't had a chance to see this yet, so I'm really excited based on that this is this Michael Caine documentary, like a great additional feature. It's just like this whole other movie. There's an interview with the director, as well as documentary Michael Caine Breaking the Mold. Michael Caine discusses his life from childhood to stardom from 1994. So there's another documentary on this documentary. So really a nice package for Alfie. And now I'm not sure if Alfie has a Blu-ray either, but don't quote me on this being a debut or not. But man, oh man, I don't think if anybody else has done it or if they're thinking about doing it, I don't know if they're going to get quite this level of release. This is really, really solid. And again, I love these boxes. They do these double disc sets sometimes, a slimmer box, but a really sturdy box. So really great release for Alfie. And lastly, we have The Chalk Garden from Ronald Neame. Now, this film has been released, I want to say, this is at least the third Blu-ray I've seen of this one in the last year. So this is a really popular title. And I still have not gotten a chance to see it yet. But I'm interested because it's Haley Mills and Deborah Kerr and John Mills. And this one might be the one to have. The Imprint edition had some really nice features as well. But this one has an audio commentary by Kat Ellinger. So that's kind of a ding, ding, ding kind of winner thing for me. So I definitely am going to check that out. A personal account interview with the production accountant, Maurice Landsberger, and a gripping account interview with the camera grip, Dennis Fraser. So I don't know, between this and the Indicator Blu-rays, it seems like you got a ton of great stuff. I have both now, so I'm definitely going to be digging deep into this movie. It says Laurel is a rebel with a streak of imp whose behavior frightens away a succession of governesses. That's, of course, Haley Mills and her new governess, played by Deborah Kerr, until the enigmatic Miss Madrigal is hired. In spite of her mysterious references, Madrigal sets about tending to the girl's reckless emotions, whilst Maitland, the compassionate butler, works overtime to maintain order in this unpredictable environment. So, sounds interesting to me. I'm definitely into it. And I'm intrigued that this movie's gotten 3 releases. Kino is the other one. So something about this movie that people really like. So I definitely have to see it. And I apologize I didn't get a chance to watch this one. before this video. But so much great stuff from Imprint, and I can't recommend them enough. For those that ask, importing them can be a little bit expensive. So you can look to places like Diabolic DVD and importcds.com, and even Amazon will have these releases after street date. Diabolic, I just saw Jesse say on Twitter the other day, they aren't pre-ordering their stuff because it's limited. So when it is released, if there is stock, it sounds like they're trying to stock as many of those titles as they can. So keep an eye on release dates and look to Diabolic DVD as well as another way to import them and save on the shipping costs, which can be pretty high. But I'll link to the Imprint website where they have these bundles. You can get them all together in one. I've heard of some people going in on ordering multiple copies of these things from the website and splitting the cost of shipping between 3 or 4 people, and that reduces the shipping to a reasonable amount in some cases. So think about that as well as an option, but definitely think about Imprint Films as a label that you should be keeping an eye on because they are doing really great work, and I'm a huge fan of everything they've done so far. So definitely check them out, So anyway, thank you guys for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.